Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Notebook on this Friday, December 20th. I am Marc-Antoine Godin, and I'm with Arpin Basu as usual. And Arpin, are you ready for Christmas? Did you buy all your stuff? No,
I am not ready for Christmas.
Okay.
I'm not ready for. I'm professionally not ready for Christmas. I have a lot to get done before I can tackle Christmas. So yeah,
you got plenty of times. 4 days. So
I got lots of time. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you know what we have less time for is discussing the Canadiens before they play again, because they have a doubleheader, 2 games in 2 nights against Detroit. They're playing on Friday night in Detroit, and then on Saturday in Montreal. So back to back against a division rival. And listen, we had an emergency podcast for our paid subscribers on Wednesday night following the trade for Alexandre Carrier. I don't think that we're necessarily going to repeat everything that was said during that podcast, but we need to address that trade first. We're going to get to see Carrier in action for the Canadiens tonight. So, I mean, when you think about it now, 36 hours after the fact, when you try to picture how we can fit with the Montreal Canadiens, what's your new thought about the acquisition of Alexandre Carrier?
I mean, I don't really have a new thought. I mean, for the benefit of our non-paid subscribers, basically we didn't get the emergency pod, which, what are you waiting for subscribing? But anyhow, it's, he is, to repeat what we said, he is the stabilizing right shot D that you have been pining for, and that the Canadiens clearly needed. They get, him inserted into the top 4 rather, just balances out their defense core, makes Martin St. Louis and Stéphane Robidas' job of bench management significantly easier. His number one quality is his compete level, and blocking shots and killing penalties and just defending. Having that and having Caden Gooley in your top 4, and then having David Savard on your bottom pair gives them the potential. Now we don't know who he's going to play with, but gives them the potential to have a guy like that on every pairing. So it really stabilizes things. The one new thought I guess I had was, and I kind of wrote about this yesterday, but we mentioned it in passing in the emergency pod that this is really bad news for Jayden Struble. Like, it's just not a good situation for him. He's aware of it. I spoke to him yesterday, Thursday, and seemed resigned to the idea that he's going to need an injury to get back in the lineup on a consistent basis. It's really, there was a roster spot or a lineup spot dedicated to him and Barron. They were rotating in and out of that spot. In theory, barring a dip in play or an injury, this will be a spot that is not there anymore.
Right.
And he seems to know that. So it's probably a tough one for him to swallow. He's a bit confused as to why he left the lineup to begin with. Didn't really feel like his play had dipped significantly. Martin St. Louis spoke, I believe it was in New Jersey, when he spoke pretty candidly about him needing to raise his floor, that when his bad is not good enough, like his bad needs to be less bad. And, I asked him if he felt there was some hesitancy creeping into his game, and he kind of agreed because something obviously happened for him to leave the lineup, but he didn't really agree in how he felt about the way he was playing. He didn't feel that hesitancy in his game. I think I saw it on certain nights. And I think that was the issue with him, is that there were certain nights when he wasn't the best version of himself, and it was impossible to predict which night that would be. And that's what Carrier kind of addresses. Like, they're not going to have that in theory,
Yeah.
with this player. He has enough of a track record, a long track record as a leader. You know, he was the captain in Gatineau. I think he wore a letter in Milwaukee. He played close to 300 games in the AHL there. Um, you know, and just judging by his exchange with reporters in Detroit on Thursday evening, um, seems thrilled to be in
Yeah.
Montreal. Like it's
Gosh,
just
huh?
real,
It's
yeah.
nice to
So
have players who feel like who really want to be with the Canadians, and we talk about how difficult it is as a market, and it's not a destination, and it's going to be taxes, weather, all that stuff. But when you have, I think it's not just the local kids, because there are some players for whom coming to play Montreal means something, but
mhm.
he's from the Quebec City region originally, and gosh, he was really hoping for the day where he could live that. And
Well, I mean, he lives within walking distance from the Bell Center. Like he's
yeah,
based in Montreal now, and so he can walk to work. Who doesn't want that?
yeah,
Yeah. So that's an added bonus, obviously, getting a guy who's so enthused.
yeah,
And we always, I hate seeing when fans naturally go to like, oh, of course they went and got a French guy. It's like it's not that. That's not the driving force behind any decision, but it's definitely an added bonus. It's a nice added thing, not just because he speaks French, but because of that. I'm going to say it in French, sentiment d'appartenance. Like just feeling fully invested in the uniform you're wearing. Having and maybe providing that extra little oomph, that little 1% more that you're willing to give when you have that feeling. John Tavares deciding to go play for the Maple Leafs and posting a photo of him in his Maple Leafs bed sheets and pajamas and everything. This is kind of a similar situation. Obviously, he's not John Tavares, but it's you get that added extra motivation when you're coming home, and to see how enthused he was, how excited he was just to talk to four reporters.
hmm
Um, wait, I don't know if he'll be as excited to talk to 30 after a game, after tomorrow night's game at the Bell Center, but that's an added bonus. So it's eager to see him play, but he's a perfect fit for what this group needed.
yeah. And earlier you were talking about Jaden Struble, and it was bad news for him. Obviously, uh, when you rotate with Barron, it means that Struble would be a candidate to play on his offside. And when Jeff Gorton commented on the trade, he said, "Well, one of the things is that by bringing a veteran right-handed defenseman, we think that it's going to give a break to our young D's who are left-handed and who are asked to play on the right side,
Mhm.
because we thought that it was getting to be a bit much for them." So that's true for Struble, obviously, and it's probably true for Kaden Gooley. I think I brought up, I think that Gooley could be an interesting, notwithstanding his shooting side. It could be interesting to have Carrier paired with somebody else than Gooley, just for
Yeah.
the balance of the top four. But if Marty St. Louis sees eye to eye with his boss in the sense that let's try to keep the young left-handed defenseman on the left, well then it's pretty obvious to me that they're going to play him with Gooley.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see tonight, but it's definitely when you have two offensive guys in Matheson and Hudson, and two more defensive guys with Gouli and Carrier. Um, the ideal combinations seem obvious that you would split Hudson and Matheson, and you would split Gouli and Kyrie. So we'll find out. We'll see what happens tonight. If you're listening to this after the game, you'll think like, "What the hell are you talking about?" But anyhow,
Well,
it's
the coach kept it very close to the chest. It's not the sort of decision that he really usually is so
guarded
private
about.
about.
Yeah,
But he decided that he really did not want to disclose that information. Um, Maybe that he had not decided, or and maybe nothing is set in stone. Also, he can try something on the first night and eventually move things around. But I think that for as much as this is a very present move because it helps the Canadiens today, I think that you can also argue that bringing Carrier helps in a variety of little reasons the other young defensemen. So it's also, apart from his own performance and his own play, it's also a way to help developing your younger defensemen. And the other thing that Gordon said, he said, we've got some other young defensemen right now who we think are in the right place in Laval to continue developing. So not rushing prospects unnecessarily, I think is a very, very healthy way to go about it.
Well, I think Logan Mayhew's brief time in Montreal, and even Joshua Roy's brief time in Montreal, was probably, I don't want to say a wake up call, but probably a warning sign for this administration, and be like, okay, well, let's make sure these guys are over ready. Let's make sure they're overcooked, and try and make sure that they don't come and have a negative experience when they come up to Montreal, that they're ready to come up and have it be positive. And so I think both in Mayhew's case and in Roy's case, that was not the case. They were negative experiences. So, I also want to talk, this obviously kind of, the geez, what's wrong with me? The reverberation for Struble
The
is
rural
obvious.
juror. Sorry.
Yeah. 2 hours later, Arpin's able to say the word. The reverberation is often obvious for Struble, but I think it's equally obvious for David Savard.
Yeah.
Final year of his contract, he's not eager to talk about it. This move clearly makes a David Savard trade easier to digest if the Canadiens were to go down that route. So do you expect David Savard to finish the season in Montreal?
I think it will depend on the return for his services. Because you could argue that, they just said that they were lacking some veteran guys, so they went out to acquire one. So your next move should not be to get rid of another veteran. So at the same time,
a right shot veteran.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
But I mean, we can see the writing on the wall. If it's not for the end of this season, it will be to the next, because Carrier can be a top 4 defenseman for you, whereas Savard cannot do that anymore. And if you keep him, let's say beyond even next season, if you try to re-sign him for another contract, then he'll be a right-handed shot for the third pairing. And then you have other candidates, that whole argument that this management has of not blocking the way to young defensemen. There could be a chance there. So I think that a lot will depend on the sort of return that they could get for Savard. If the market is robust, because Savard, in the playoffs, it's a rugged style of play. It's not necessarily a lot of speedy back and forth. It's a lot more chippy around the net. Having a profile like David Savard on your blue line is probably more helpful in the playoffs than during the regular season, and in a very specific role where you have a team maybe that's a contending team that has a need for one extra body on the PK, for example. It can be attractive, but you've got to be able to monetize that properly. And I wouldn't be surprised that they set an internal, they draw a line in the sand and say, okay, if we get more than X, then we move him. But what really would we gain by getting just a fourth round pick for this guy, whereas he can stay with us for the rest of the year, continue helping the young guys, and we wouldn't have to all of a sudden play a guy on his wrong side or having to call Mailloux up. To me, it all lies on how much they can get in return for David Savard.
Well, when you look at sort of the impending free agents on the blue line, almost all of the top ones play on contending teams or teams that are trending towards playing in the playoffs. You know, you have Neil Pionk in Winnipeg, Jacob Chikrin in Washington, it's a few others. Aaron Ekblad, obviously in
Yeah.
Florida, Gavrikov in LA. So, you know, the one guy is Marcus Patterson in Pittsburgh, left shot, kind of a different profile, well, similar profile. So, in that sense, if the market is essentially barren, not no pun intended, but if there's nothing there's not a whole lot available in terms of that profile of player. You know, we saw sort of the sweepstakes for Chris Tanev last year,
Yeah.
that Dallas winds up winning. It's possible that when you get to the deadline, unless a hockey trade can be worked out, David Savard will be the most attractive player that fits this profile. Right shot, penalty killing, defensive, physical, playoff style player, shot blocking, all that stuff. You know, he might be one of one in a certain sense, you know, and so if that's the case, you know, I think the bar last year, you know, because the Canadiens were definitely fielding calls about Savard last year at the deadline. And I think the bar last year was a first round pick, which is why he didn't get moved. And so I think the bar will have dropped. But I think if they get anything less than a second round pick as an offer, they might be tempted to just keep him and just roll with it and let his contract expire. And then whatever happens, happens.
If it's a second rounder, you run with it.
Yeah, no, second, but that's it. But I think that, well, I should say, so either a second round pick or a prospect of some sort, you know, a prospect that probably not, you know, it's not going to be a blue chip prospect. It's not going to be a top level prospect, but some sort of prospect that fills a hole elsewhere or even on the blue line in the organization, could mean that Savard goes. But what this trade does is it creates the possibility of that. Like if that situation manifests itself between now and March 7th, because Carrier is here, they feel more comfortable doing something like that. And so I think it definitely, while it's not guaranteed, I think it makes it more likely that David Savard gets moved.
Yeah. No,
And I don't think that's breaking news. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. But you know, I would like the idea of him coming back as a 7th D next year, finish his career 1 year, you know, as an insurance policy, and not having a guy that's necessarily like Jaden Struebel's your 7 defenseman now. Okay, fine. It's not great for the development of a young player if he is to wait in the wings until there's an injury. But having a guy like Savard who would just slowly fade in the sunset, but in the place where he's most comfortable, on a team that loves him, I wouldn't mind that at all. I think it'd be a good fit for that responsibility because he's quickly entering that phase of his career. So if you say that in the same breath as hoping to get a second round pick, those two things don't necessarily go hand in hand. But we've seen crazier things at the trade deadline. So
we've seen David Savard himself go for a first round pick.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know. It's I think it's more likely that he gets moved, but they're going to wait. They're not in any rush to do that now.
No, they're not in any rush. But I think that is it just becomes more likely. That's my thing. Is that I think there would be more hesitation if Carrier wasn't there to do that, especially if the Canadiens can play themselves into even the periphery of quote unquote trademark the mix in the next month or so. Then, which, as we mentioned on the last episode, is highly, highly unlikely considering the schedule they have ahead of them. But if they get to March and they're within some sort of striking distance, or they're like 6 points out or whatever, they would maybe hesitate with Savard. Whereas now, if they're in that situation, um, then it's less of a worry. That's all I'm saying. So
And also, there's the fact that Carrier arrives and joins the top four. It puts back Savard on the third pairing, which is where he would play if he were to be acquired by a contending team. But
he's
if
been
you
on the
put
third
him,
pairing for a while now.
yeah,
He's
but
been
I
playing
mean,
with
you look at
Xhekaj on
it,
the third pairing for a while.
that's true. But ultimately, with special teams, he ends up playing, he was playing more than Barron,
Yeah,
so
well, yeah, with the penalty kill included,
yeah,
sure. I
yeah.
mean, but yeah,
So I'm talking, yeah, I'm talking more in total ice time, like it's second pairing ice time more than 5 on 5. 5 on 5, I agree with you. He was in the third pairing, but overall, in terms of his usage, um, I think that if his role is diminished and they squeeze the best out of him now, well, he's going to be a more attractive player now, then you're using him too much. And he shows that he's faltering a bit because he's overused. So I think that if you manage his minutes properly, that the way they intended on game one, um, then that it might portray a better version of David Savard, a more attractive one for their team that would say, you know what, that guy, the way he plays in Montreal, I could I could see him, being added to our group, and he'd be a worthwhile contributor.
yeah. I guess the other guy that could be impacted by Carrier's arrival, sort of indirectly, um, is maybe Arbor Xhekaj in the sense of his penalty kill usage.
Mm-hmm.
Because now if you're adding Carrier to the penalty kill, Savard's obviously going to kill penalties. Goulie's going to kill penalties. Mike Matheson's going to kill penalties. So that's now you have four guys.
Yeah,
And generally you need four guys to kill penalties. So it's possible that this means uh, Xhekaj is going to see a diminished role on the penalty kill, which is unfortunate for him. It's something that
yeah,
was very important to him, and it solidifies your role on the team and your spot in the lineup, frankly, when you have a role on special teams. And he was growing into a pretty good penalty killer. He's come such a long way in such a short time. Honestly, like from the version of Arbor Xhekaj we saw at the end of October, he is just a world apart from that now.
yeah,
So he's I guess another kind of sort of collateral damage from the trade is that Struble is seemingly losing access to a lineup spot, and Xhekaj is probably going to wind up seeing at least diminished, if not completely removed from the penalty kill. So that's something else to consider, but it's I think he's far from losing his spot in the lineup, but it's if his play dips, that does make him vulnerable to losing his spot to Struble down the road.
yeah. That's a very good point. And also, it's not as if he could bank on the fact that the other three defensemen will take on so many penalties that he'd have his regular turn in the rotation, because I mean, Xhekaj himself is the defenseman with the most minor penalties on the team.
Mm-hmm.
Second is Lane Hudson, who's not playing on the PK. Then you go to Matheson, Savard, and Goulet respectively, but they're not. It's not a group that's penalized a ton, so he might not have a ton of opportunities to help out in that regard. Um,
Play the
but
Suzuki role. The Suzuki role who gets to go on
exactly,
every time Josh Anderson takes a penalty, which he leads the league in
that's
forwards
it.
for
That's it.
penalties. Yes.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So because that's what made me think about it. It's because of Anderson, Suzuki gets his fair share.
It's
All
a
in all,
semi-regular shift on the penalty kill. Yeah,
that's it.
absolutely.
But Xhekaj is the Josh Anderson in this equation. So
Yes,
it's a
true.
bit problematic there. But I don't know. I mean, Matheson's also has developed into a very good penalty killer. So I don't know if they would reduce his minutes and give more to Xhekaj in that sense, especially since he's
I doubt
already
it.
been moved to PP2.
Mhm.
So that would be a bit much now to also take some PK time away from him. But it's a long process. At least the team knows that Xhekaj can do it. And if we loop this back to the trade, uh, Xhekaj has shown in a matter of 2 months how much ground you can make and how you can improve.
Hmm.
Well, we've never seen Barron for 2 months grow his game exponentially in the same way and say, you know what, in those 2 months he has erased the doubts and we know we can trust him. And
Well, yeah,
if
I kind of put it on. I was asked about this on Mitch Melnick's show yesterday, but to me, it's they always Marty loves to say, and even Kent Hughes likes to say that development is not linear, but you needed it to be more linear in Barron's case. Like it can't be so non-linear
yeah,
that it looks like a roller coaster. Like you need it you need it to at least level off sometimes, and if for the dips to be relatively minor. But in his case, the dips were pretty major and they were frequent. So
yeah,
um, I can't say I can't say Barron's a much better player today than he was a year ago. I mean, that's really the reality of the situation with him, and I hope he figures it out in Nashville, and I think a different mindset would do him some good, and maybe less focus on his weakness, and more focus on his strengths would help him. Um, and we'll see if he has an opportunity. Barry Trotz expressed, first of all, told Pierre LeBrun that he tried to get Barron last year, so
yeah,
he clearly likes the player. But then expressed the Predators' history in developing defensemen. I would counter that it's been a while since the Predators developed a really strong defenseman, but yeah, they used to. And Barry Trotz was the coach when they were doing that, so he seems to think that they can take Barron and turn him into something that's more consistent and more viable at the NHL level. And I wish them luck in doing that. I wish Barron luck in doing that as well. What a way to find out you got traded, though,
man, yeah, I know.
huh?
So those for those people who were not aware, I mean, he went out for dinner with I mean, there was a bunch of guys, but Gouli, Xhekaj, so himself was in the car. I think Pizzetta was in the car too.
Pizzetta
But
was in the car and Struble was at the dinner. And that was it. Those were the guys.
yeah, it must. I hope it was a big car because those are big dudes. I
Well,
mean,
that's
it's
it. So I was wondering, I didn't ask Struble. So Struble took an Uber home,
yeah,
and it just didn't dawn on me at the time to ask him. I was like, well, why didn't you just get in the car with the rest of the guys? But then I thought of it. There were five guys at dinner, but squeezing those five guys into a car would have been a challenge. But anyhow, so it was Gouli, Xhekaj, Pizzetta, and Barron. Barron's driving, and Gouli was kind of like, oh, you heard about that? I was like, yeah. He's like, I didn't want to bring that up. I'm like, well, too bad. It's like, here it is. He's like, yeah. So I was like, did Gorton's name just pop up on the screen? He's like, yep, Apple CarPlay, Apple CarPlay. All of a sudden, they're listening to music, whatever. All of a sudden, Jeff Gorton calling on the screen. The other three guys in the car are just like, okay, maybe we'll get out. We'll
yeah.
just walk the rest of the way. So yeah, Barron had to pull over. They get out. He answers the phone and he gets the news. And even Gorton mentioned that's the first time he's ever called a player to tell him he's traded with a car full of teammates, and that had to leave the car for him to deliver that news.
I must say, watching the Avail yesterday, Gouli seemed a bit shaken up by this. He's losing a friend, and
No, he's tight with him. They played on the World Junior team together. They were
yeah,
defense partners, if I'm not mistaken, on that team. So they
yeah,
go way back. Yeah.
yeah, and they live close by too. I mean, there's a
Mhm.
reason why they were all they were carpooling because they live in
Yeah.
the
They
same
Louis mentioned
neighborhood.
that they all live like 5 minutes apart. So,
Yeah. So
but
I think that it on the moment it was hard for him to see like the benefits of adding Alexandre Carrier to him. He was losing a buddy, and it's my colleague Alexandre Gascon in Radio Canada at Radio Canada in his piece was saying that it looked a bit like the end of the innocence for that group of young defensemen, realizing even more so than when the team traded Jordan Harris because they knew that there was an overflow of defensemen. Now it's the first time that one of their buddies is traded, and it's like, whoa, the reality kicks in a big way.
well, speaking to first time one of their buddies, this is other than Jonathan Kovacevic, who they picked up on waivers. This is the first player that this administration has acquired that they've traded away. And I think that speaks to um, it speaks to this administration being able to be make a clear-eyed evaluation of a decision they made themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an encouraging sign because this situation, Barron, forget who Barron is specifically, but think of who Barron represents. He's a guy that they identified as being potentially maybe not a core piece, but a piece of their defense going forward. I think they entered this season hoping that Barron could claim a spot on that right side. That's the big reason why Kovacevic was traded, was to clear the deck for one of Barron or Mayu, or maybe even Reinbacher at the time, to claim that spot. Barron had the inside track because of his waiver eligibility. And once they saw that he wasn't claiming it, or he wasn't stepping up to really force them to keep him, they made a pretty quick decision that, okay, this guy's not going to work out. Let's go get someone that can provide a bridge, similar to Jake Allen's contract extension, similar to Sam Montembeault's current contract, these kind of bridge years to get to our younger guys. I think
I think the Montembeault comparison is pretty it's pretty bad.
Well, even when they extended Allen, it was kind of the same thing. They were going to bridge it. It was going to be a bridge to whatever was next, and then they did it again with Montembeault, 3-year deal. Now they have 2 years of Carrier plus the rest of this year, obviously, so 2.5 years. But to me, what impresses me is that they didn't cling to this idea that we were right about this kid. This kid is the guy that we saw back then when we traded Artturi Lehkonen to the Avalanche. They didn't cling to that notion. They didn't insist on being right. No. They kind of recognized that, okay, maybe this was a bit of a misread. Let's address it. And they did. And so I think they're going to have this situation come up more and more. Like, this is the first of many times where they're going to have a clear-eyed evaluation of their own decision. So the fact that they were able to move on quickly on this player, some would say maybe too quickly, but I think it speaks to their ability to objectively evaluate their team without falling in love with players that they themselves acquired.
Well, I mean, it's always what the player is with you, not what he could be or how he performs at a later point in his career. I mean, Barron, the version of look, he was acquired for Artturi Lehkonen, and everybody was sad to see him go. But if we go back to the time of the trade, Lehkonen was almost becoming a fourth line forward, a shadow of his former self, and he was not at all the player that he became in Colorado. He had been that player in Montreal, but he was that Artturi Lehkonen was gradually fading away. So they traded him at a time where basically he was not the shiniest version of Artturi Lehkonen. So now they trade Barron, not necessarily for what he could become, but essentially for what he was and the level of progress he was showing with Montreal. Now, when you say it was a misread, yes and no. I think that when they acquired Barron, they had identified traits in his play that they liked, and it was a development project. And
all the traits that Barry Trotz said he liked, by the way. Same traits. The same traits that Barry Trotz said he liked in Barron are the traits that the Canadiens saw in him then. It's size, skating, shot, those things. Yes.
Exactly. So it's almost like a scouting report that you're trading for rather than, performances or results. And
so he was a good AHL player. I mean,
I know.
At the time, there were results that attached to him. Like, there were.
Yeah, but some people in Laval say that he was also up and down with the Rocket when he was.
No. I mean, in Colorado, he's a good AHL player with the Eagles in Colorado.
I have no issue whatsoever with them going after him at the time. I mean, it was a good gamble. That's fine. You could say, why is it that team chooses to give up on that prospect instead of another. But every time a prospect is traded, you could ask yourself that same question. So it's just that at the move, it's not necessarily a misread on what he could bring. It's just that there's this X factor, which is what is the ability of a player to get better? What's his ability to get information, process it, and use it to improve? How quickly can he do that? And honestly, if hockey executives and hockey people had the answer to those questions and were able to identify that X factor, man, scouting life would be so much easier. But it's really a big unknown. So there was nothing that necessarily suggested that it would be a failed experiment. Just like those people who say, "Oh, we'll look at what they did with Dach and Newhook, and those trades are going backwards or whatever." I think that they went for a young player who could have legitimately developed into a good defenseman, and he still could. But it's just that you could not see in advance that this guy would not develop. For example, I go back to Xhekaj, who got a good chunk of 2 months that proves you that he can gain some momentum, improve, and keep that improvement in his play on a more consistent basis. So it's as the player gets older, now the Preds are trying the same thing, but now they've got the information of the Montreal Canadiens experience, trying to make that player improve. They see that they've tried it and then it has not paid off. So they must be really confident in their own way of developing players to say, we're going to give that same kid a chance in his third organization, and this time, third time will be the charm.
Yeah. Okay. So they did have a misread. I mean, it's part of the whole projection of players is projecting what they will look like when they reach maturity. I mean, that's when I say misread, it's not really criticism. It's just they thought that this guy would project into their top six group in Montreal, and he didn't. That's all. I'm not saying that, I'm not saying they made a poor evaluation of the player, but gauging a player's ability to improve. Yeah, no, gauging a player's ability to improve is part of the evaluation that you have to make. That's the reality of scouting, and so in that sense, it was a misread. Now we'll see if Nashville made a misread or if Nashville actually validates the read that the Canadiens made, because if he flourishes in Nashville, then fine. But that's the point being, is that they didn't unnecessarily extend his runway to prove them right, basically. So I think that's a good quality for a front office to have, to be like, okay, this might have been a misread on our part. Let's move on. And we have an opportunity to use this player to address a glaring need on our team right now. And the other thing it speaks to, is the importance of right now for this administration. They want to support this group of players and have them win more games. The Laine acquisition was clearly about that. This acquisition, in my mind, is clearly about that, and it's having these guys, the younger guys, develop in not necessarily a winning environment, but not a terrible losing environment either. They don't want that. So we'll see if Carrier can provide that. It's a lot to ask for a 5'11" defensive defenseman who kind of but definitely fills a need for this team and speaks to management's viewpoint for this season and actually follows the logic that this management group expressed right off the bat, not only right off the bat this season, but at the end of last season. So this is the logical thing to do in light of what management hoped this season will be. And in light of what Martin St. Louis said, the learning how to win thing. Well, you can't learn how to win if you don't win every now and then. So helping this team win is important. And I think Carrier will do that.
Yeah, because he does the things that helps a team win. You know.
Yeah, he does.
So hey,
Um,
you wanted to touch on a completely different matter, different topic, which was the power play,
mhm.
and more specifically, Cole Caulfield on the power play with Patrick Laine basically stealing his spot.
Yes, yes,
So
and I think it's an interesting. Cole Caufield's a team guy. And no one's happier when Laine scores than Caufield, right? Obviously his first goal. There's that photo of him bear hugging him from behind. Every time Laine scores, Caufield is the closest guy to him, it seems,
yeah,
and he's thrilled. So this is not, but it's clear to me at least that Laine being in that spot means Cole Caufield kind of has to redefine himself as a power play threat to some extent, right? Um, they don't always want Laine just staying there. The Canadiens have baked a lot of movement into their power play this season already without Laine. Um, we've talked about it on the pod before, but they've rotated guys in positions. It's part of their DNA as a power play to be unpredictable to the opposition, provide different looks. Sometimes Suzuki will be in that left circle. At times Dach was in that left circle. They kind of move guys around. But when you have a guy who's so obviously a threat, like an elite threat from that spot, much like Ovechkin in Washington, much like Stamkos was in Tampa. When you have that shot from that spot, not having Laine in that spot makes no sense. And I think everyone would agree with that. But so Martin St. Louis asked about this morning in Detroit, and he was asked about Stamkos because he played with him, right? And I said, how is it that everyone knew that Stamkos was going to shoot from there and he still got shots from there? And the one thing he mentioned is like, yes, he was able to do it, but what really helped is when Braden Point became the bumper guy. And you look at Ovechkin, TJ Oshie, elite bumper guy on that power play,
elite,
right?
elite.
The Canadiens have not had, aside from Sean Monahan for a while before he actually moved to the goal line, but they haven't had a really good bumper guy. You know, when they got Dvorak, we thought maybe Dvorak could be that guy. Obviously, he's not. Sean
They
Monahan,
never tried him there.
no,
That's
not
weird.
really. But even if they had, let's be
Yeah,
honest.
they
Yeah,
were not. Yeah,
yeah. So I'm thinking for the power play, it would be really great for both the power play and for Cole Caulfield himself if he could develop into that guy. And in a kind of a sneaky way, like not always be posted in the bumper, but I saw at one point in that Buffalo game, Laine was in the left circle and Caufield was like below him at the goal line, almost in the corner. And I was like, well, that's a weird place to stand on a power play. Like, what are you doing there? Like, there's no threat from there. But the more I thought about it, I was like, well, if the penalty killer on that side of the ice is overcompensating for Laine being in that left circle, there should be a soft little area that Caufield could just kind of skate into right behind that penalty killer in that bumper, and he could sort of arrive as a pass arrives and then let go of a shot with his release. I think he could score a bunch of goals that way. Um, would be an interesting evolution for him, like for him to become the bumper threat that ensures that Laine gets his shots. So
yeah,
either the penalty kill respects Caufield moving into that spot, and then that opens things up for Laine. And if they don't, then you have like another elite shooter from the right side, a right shot, I mean, that can be fed from that side of the ice for another one timer, and you can get that either from the goal line, you can get it from the right circle, but having that kind of layered, the other thing Martin mentioned is what can you find underneath that threat? Well, that's something that's underneath the Laine threat. If a team overcompensates for him, they need to find someone who's dangerous in that area of the ice, and I think Caufield would be a good candidate for that.
yeah. So the way Caulfield described it is that he would be banking a lot on movement for both from him and Nick
Mm-hmm.
to basically make it more difficult for the other team to cover them, and by having to always keep tabs of where they are and trying to protect their shots, it would either open up more space for Laine, like like we saw against Buffalo as an extreme example. Um, or they start to cheat on Liney's side and it opens up one of those two guys. But it
Right.
was basically an idea of movement. It might end up that he will be put on the bumper. And I agree with you that when Marty talks about Braden Point being in the bumper, it's probably top of mind for him and something that that he can relate to today's equation on the power
Mhm.
play. Um, but and the other thing is we have almost never seen Caufield on the bumper because he was the best threat that they had as a shooter. Now he's the second best threat.
Yeah.
So either it becomes a more traditional bumper, and then it boils down to being able to read the soft pockets of ice, as you say, being able to have a quick trigger in tight space, quick and precise trigger, but in tight areas, being able to read maybe and intercept passes that look like it's going to somebody else, but he short circuits them and uses it as a pass for himself. Those are
Mhm.
skills that he might very well possess, but he has not been put in a position then to showcase it all that much yet. So I think it's a possibility, but I like this idea based on the ample movement we've seen from that first unit since the beginning of season, and the mentality that they've developed of saying, "Hey, let's show different schemes from one power play to the next and switch positions, rotate guys and whatnot." Uh, if he could be more of a roaming presence, a rover, and that basically he could even be harder to defend if they can't quite identify where he's going, what's his position, and what are his intentions. And
Mhm.
the harder he will be to contain, the better the power play will be.
Braden Point, by the way, was tied for ninth in the NHL with 15 power play goals last season, while Steven Stamkos was third with 19. So you can coexist and you can produce from that bumper position if it's done properly. And
For sure.
so I think one thing Cole is elite at, and always has been, is timing his arrival into dangerous areas of the ice. He's always been good at that. So if you give him that mission to be like, don't just stand in the bumper, do your roaming around, but roam around in a way that you're going to arrive in that bumper spot at the perfect time so that you're a threat and you're open and you can let go of your shot. And if there's anyone on this team who could do that well, it's Cole Caufield. He has an innate understanding of space on the ice and recognizing pockets and areas and times and getting lost on the ice and having defenders forget about you. I mean, his whole career at Wisconsin was based on this. Like
Yeah.
every team Wisconsin faced, we're not letting this guy beat us. And he consistently beat them just because he knew he would go hide behind the net for a while. He would go hide somewhere, and then all of a sudden he'd pop up into space and he'd just fire a goal in. Well, they get him to do that on the power play. It's almost like he's made for it, right? But he's always been that left circle shooter. It'd be like kind of a redefining of his power play identity to some extent. But I think his toolkit is perfectly suited to do that in this instance. And if they can get that going, then they're going to score a lot of power play goals, I would think.
I honestly, as to me, as long as he's not closer to the point and he's
Mm-hmm.
lower in the zone, I'll be happy wherever he goes. But you
Yeah.
say if they do this, they're going to score a lot of goals. I think that their current setup, that 5-man unit, is extremely promising.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that excite me the most about the Montreal Canadiens until the end of the season. They really have. I mean, they were good back in the Guy Carbonneau days behind the bench,
That's
but
all they were
back,
good at. That's all that
yeah,
they were good at back then.
yeah. So
They rode
that
that to like the top record in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
had, I mean, everybody remembers Alex Kovalev on the half wall. Michael Ryder he's their last good bumper. Michael
Right.
Ryder.
Yeah.
And then, but obviously the booming shot from the point that came into different different formats. But Sheldon Surrey probably being the face of that. But since then, I mean, it's been abysmal for more than a decade, maybe save for a season or two in that lot.
Mm.
Now they have a chance to really develop a firmly top 10 power play in the league, I think, with that group that they have. And yeah, I think that Caufield, you have to find a way to keep him as a threat, because sitting, standing 5 feet to the left of Laine, close to the goal, was probably not the optimal place for him to be, because he
No.
didn't get the puck a whole lot. He needs to move. And but yeah, ultimately maybe that we say a little bit of the same thing, you and I. But there's an option if he's used not only as a decoy, but they have to entertain a second option. It cannot be we can use this guy so that Laine can get alone. No. Laine is an option, but Caufield has to remain an option too.
Yeah. Well, I think this is the best way to make him a viable option. Like, if it's, to me, and if you don't use him as an option, then it's pointless. Then it doesn't serve the purpose. That's like Oshie was an option on the Washington power play, and that's why Ovechkin was able to get the shots that he got. Point, obviously, clear option in the bumper spot, and that's why Stamkos was able to get the shots that he got. So, I think, and further to your point, since the 2013 lockout, the Canadiens have the worst power play in the NHL.
Yeah,
17.2% since then.
I think there's only 2017, 2018 season where they were half decent, but otherwise it's been a joke ever since the structure, like the quality power plays are more like the shooters from the dots.
Mm-hmm.
It has moved from the point to the dots. Ever since that's been the adjustment at the NHL level, the Canadiens have not followed suit. They didn't have the trigger man, or did not have more than one at a time, and they were easy to defend because of that.
Just a quick second point on the power play. I spoke to Kirby Dach about this, and Marty actually on Thursday. But usually when you get taken off power play one, that's bad news for a player. I really think this is good news for Kirby Dach, because the way the second unit is set up, the big shooter on the second unit is Heineman in the right circle, right? So the whole power play shifts, and now Dach on power play one, he didn't really touch the puck a whole lot. Like he didn't have a clear role on that unit. He was basically playing that Suzuki role, like high in the zone on the right side and just kind of step into a shot, but it never happened. Now on power play two, yes, he's getting fewer minutes. He's getting less ice time on the power play, but that power play goes through him. He's going to touch the puck a lot more. And I asked him about it, and he's like, yeah, it's definitely, he gets more out of those fewer minutes in terms of trying to build confidence that you can carry into your 5-on-5 play. He's getting more touches. He's more involved. He's more of a focal point. And ultimately, in the year-long project of building Kirby Dach back up, I really think him going to power play two and being the conduit on that unit will benefit him more than whatever the hell he was doing on power play one before, which was a whole lot of nothing. He basically just kind of floating around and not really contributing all that much. And what's important is that he kind of sees it that way as well. And Marty kind of admitted that was their motivation in choosing Dach to come off that unit when Laine got back. So let's see if that has a positive kind of side effect on Kirby Dach moving forward.
During the game against Buffalo, I told you, we were watching the game, and I told you that second power play looked like a power play one from many years from Montreal.
You have Matheson on there. You got Dach. Newhook on entries is excellent. Heineman's a great shooter. Yeah, and you take Armia off and put Dach on, it changes everything, right? I mean, Armia is not wired like a power play player. He's just
No.
not. Marty often talks about attack mode. That is not Yoel Armia. He's not an attack mode type of guy. So it's yeah, for sure. That second unit is by far the best second unit the Canadiens had in ages, and rivals some of the first units they've had, especially early on in Marty's tenure and late in Dominique Ducharme's tenure, like during COVID when they were losing guys left and right, people dropping like flies. And, Raphael Harvey-Pinard becomes the star of your top power play unit kind of thing. There were moments where there were some very dubious power play units up for this team, but yeah, for sure. That second unit is probably better than some of the first units they've had in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. And yeah, you're on point saying that Dach has got something to do, and Heineman too. I mean, eventually, of course, he's a left shooter. Had he been a righty, I would advocate that he could be a good bumper too on that first unit. But he's a lefty, so he's going to stay with the second power play. But I mean, it's promising. All right, time for Future Friday.
Let's do it. Future Friday.
So before we get going with Future Friday, just a quick note regarding our future episodes. So we are going to, so the holidays are coming. Everybody wants some time off, and that's fine. We're going to take very little time off. So we're going to have our episode on Monday, the 23rd. We're just going to skip the episode of the 27th. So next Friday we'll be off. Mm-hmm. But otherwise it'll be, our regular programming. So just take note for all you people who are not paid subscribers that next Friday, we're going to skip one and, devote time to our families a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to do a little recharge here. We got to recharge the batteries. Plus, not a whole lot's going to happen with the Canadiens between Monday's episode and any potential Friday episode. And we're not just going to give you kind of a best of 2024. We're not going to give you a list episode. We're not going to just provide some filler. We're just going to take a day. We're going to take one episode off. So We'll be back the following Monday, which is, I guess, December 30th. The Canadiens will have played back-to-back that weekend down in Florida, beginning the treacherous stretch between Christmas and Four Nations face-off. So we'll recap that on the 30th and then have our Friday episode return on January 3rd in 2025. So yeah, let's get to Future Friday. So for Future Friday, we're kind of doing an end around on Future Friday and sort of having, we thought we'd discuss a little bit the Canadiens' visit to Russia. Obviously everyone's seen the photos by now. Kent Hughes, Vincent Lecavalier, and Nick Bobrov were in St. Petersburg to watch not only Ivan Demidov play, but primarily watch him play, meet with SKA, tour their facility, and turned into it basically turned into a promotional vehicle for for the SKA head coach Roger Rotenberg. He was suddenly posting photos and posts and this and that, and I don't know, I think a bit despite themselves. They were used a little bit, I think, for some promotional material.
No doubt. Yeah. There's a picture where he's in the middle and they surround him, and then there's a video where he's the one talking and they're listening to him attentively. Yeah. There is clearly a power dynamic where there's just the use of social media, in that sense it was oriented in a way like the people of Montreal Canadiens are truly listening to Roman Rotenberg and what he's got to say. So good bit of marketing, if not propaganda.
Right. You said Roman Rotenberg, which I think is his dad.
Yeah. No.
Oh, sorry. I got that wrong. Yeah. Anyhow, I think I called him Roger, which is not his name. Yeah. So that's one thing. And then, so there's been, I guess, some questioning of the Canadians going to Russia at a time when Russia is still invading Ukraine, is not an ally of either Canada or the United States, and whether they should have done that. And Jeff Gordon was asked about it by our friend Guillaume Lefrançois in La Presse. I thought his answer was perfectly appropriate, that, once we draft you, you are a member of our family. We're going to watch you, and we're going to care about you, and then we're going to share our thoughts on your game with you. And that's primarily what they've gone to do.
Yeah.
And that is primarily what they've gone to do. Now, he said that there's no concern about Ivan Demidov. I would say that was not 100% sincere. I think this trip was meant to mitigate any concern they have over Demidov's usage over there. Now, I don't think they went there to try and force Rothenberg to do anything, but I think they did want to make sure that Demidov was maintaining a big picture view here. It can be easy for a kid that age, that talented, to get lost in the minutia of a season and lose that big picture view. So in my opinion, there was at least a part of the motivation for the trip was to make sure Demidov was in a good place, and that they could reassure him that, listen, you just got to get to the end of the line here. His contract expires, I believe, in May. And once that happens, you're coming to Montreal. This will all be behind you, and your NHL career can start. You're almost there. Keep going, kind of thing. So when Jeff Gordon said there was absolutely no concern about Demidov, I don't know if that was 100% true, but I think in the grand scheme of things, you could take that to mean like, well, we have no concern about Demidov becoming a great player for the Montreal Canadiens. But is there concern about how Demidov's been handled this season? I think there was a little bit of concern.
Yeah. And also there's the fact that Scott offered multiple contract extensions to Demidov, which he turned down in every instance. And there is at least a hypothesis going around that the reason why his time on ice went down so much is because he kept refusing the contract offers. So by going there, the Montreal Canadiens present themselves again. They come back being top of mind to Demidov. It's not just the team that drafted him at the NHL level. It's sending the message that we're still very much counting on you, and don't you dare sign an extension with St. Petersburg, because we want you in Montreal ASAP. So I think that it's been difficult for Demidov, and you could say that he's been holding his ground in that sense, but he suffered the consequences of it, and I think that the Canadiens must have expressed it in one way or another. The fact that both organizations are not curators, but they're basically they're protecting the development of that player, or that's what they're supposed to do. And so they're trusting Scott to do that. I don't know how much confidence they have in their ability to do so, but my feeling is that just by going there, they're saying to Demidov that they very well count on him, and that they hope that he'll cross the ocean sooner rather than later.
Yeah, totally. And again, it's not, they have two other prospects, one of whom was playing against Demidov just the other day, Bogdan Konishkov. They got the goaltender Volokin in Russia. There are draft eligible players that they could go look at. That's the fact that Bobrov and LeCavalier are also there. I think there's, when Jeff Gordon termed it a scouting trip, I'm sure that they're there to also get eyes on some of the draft eligible players that they might be interested in. So, um, but this is a pretty significant development. Like it's, Bobrov was obviously in Russia on 2 occasions last season to look at Demidov specifically and other players. Canadiens made that commitment. They have that luxury when they have someone who's such a high-ranking official on their team that has a Russian passport. That helps. I'm not sure quite. I'm not quite sure how they got into the country. Um, I would imagine it was difficult, and there was a lot of uh, well, just that it was difficult. This trip is not easy to do right now. Don't forget there's still economic sanctions against Russia. Most Western credit cards don't work in that country. There's all sorts of hurdles to doing a trip like this. So it just shows you the importance the Canadians placed on it, that they were willing to not only send Bobrov, but Hughes and LeCavalier, who don't have Russian passports, for them to go and do this. Um, I think shows you that there was some concern. It's kind of validation that they wouldn't just do this. They could have easily just sent Bobrov, right? And been like, the fact that most specifically Kent Hughes went added to the kind of the gravitas and if you want to make Demidov feel important, well, your general manager coming into a country where it's complicated to enter and it's complicated to travel to sends that message loud and clear. And um, so yeah, I think that's what it was about. And I don't think, I've seen speculation. Are they trying to force Rottenberg to play him more? Are they trying to force them out of final months of his contract? Are they trying to bring him back with them? There's none of that. I think the Canadians have a great deal of respect. Well, they respect the autonomy of the SCA organization in St.
Yeah.
Petersburg, and they understand that
But it's very delicate, you know.
it's delicate. You can't just go in and start making demands on this independent
No.
organization. So I think they're cognizant of that, but so I don't think there was any of that going on, and I think they were mainly focused on spending some time with Demidov,
Yeah,
telling him what they think of his game, and just reassuring him that he's just got to truck through this season, and there's something really really interesting at the end of it.
yeah, and it was also meant to be a short trip. I think maybe the decision to go now. It was interesting to know that they would that Demidov's team was facing Konyushkov's
Hmm.
because I don't think that they would have gone out of their way, or they were in Russia long enough to travel to go see Konyushkov directly. So it's a nice 2-for-1 because it enables them also to send a signal to him if they have the opportunity to talk to Konyushkov to say, hey, we have not forgotten about you. You might be under contract beyond this season, but you're still a prospect of our organization.
Hmm.
So, but when Gorton talks about a scouting trip, yeah, you have the interesting thing is that there are two prospects that play for who play for Dynamo Moscow Junior, Ivan Ryabkin
Hmm.
and Kurban Limatov. That potentially those kids could be targets, but if 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 Kent Hughes made the trip, it was strictly for Demidov, and I don't think that there's anything else than protecting the asset,
Yeah.
reassuring him, and they have too much invested, and they believe in that player a lot, and it has certainly not gone the way that they had hoped in terms of him developing and having a productive season with Ska. I mean, whether he was scratched, benched, being a third forward with not a single shift during a game, or seeing so many games below 10 minutes, having to deal with a lengthy slump.
Hmm.
All those things, they had a chance to happen because the minute that the kid doesn't play in the MHL and he joins the KHL, well, there's a lot of younger players who unfortunately suffer that same fate in Russia. That's just the way that they operate. And frankly, they're not alone because in Sweden, sometimes it's the same thing too.
Yeah.
but they were, I guess they were hoping to avoid that situation.
It's like that in the NHL too sometimes. Let's be
Yeah, but
honest.
yeah, it's not to that
Sometimes.
extent. Sometimes, well, if you're going to play 6 or 7 minutes, they're going to send you down to the AHL because they don't.
Yeah,
There's
or
not a team in the NHL that
back to
says you
junior in this
go
case.
back
Yeah.
to. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
it's at some point it just ceases to be worth it. So they were in a
Right. But that's
situation
because
where
you're
they could not.
invested in the development of the player.
Yeah,
Whereas in the case of the KHL, the case of Scott St. Petersburg, since this kid refuses to sign a contract extension, they're not invested in the development of the player. They want to use him to help them win. And you could argue that he would help them win if he played more, but his development is not top of mind for that organization. And I think that's what concerns the Canadiens, is that obviously his development is vitally important to them. So that's the why behind the trip. I don't think there's anything else going on there. I saw some speculation online, like they showed up with suitcases full of cash, kind of thing. No, I don't think that's going on.
no.
On Konyushkov, by the way, just interestingly, he plays for Torpedo, coached by Igor Larionov, same team as Anton Salayev, same team as former Kings defenseman Voinov. He's playing 23 minutes a night.
Yeah.
And has 9 points in 36 games. Tops on the team in ice time among defensemen, more than Salayev, more than Voinov. Has not taken a single minor penalty in 36 games, playing 23 minutes a night as a defenseman. Pretty crazy. Hasn't taken a penalty at all, I should say. Like, he has 0 penalty minutes.
Okay.
Pretty interesting.
That escaped me. That's pretty good.
But yeah, he's under contract until the end of May 2026. So he's got one more season in Russia.
Yeah.
He just turned, actually, look at that. He turns 22 today. It is his 22nd birthday. Today, December 20th.
Happy birthday, Bogdan.
Happy birthday to Bogdan Konyushkov. So by the time that contract expires, he'll be 23. We'll have had a lot of seasoning in the KHL. And, I think the Canadiens will have an interesting right shot option becoming available to them at the end of next season. So someone else to throw into that mix with Mailloux, Reinbacher, even Adam Engstrom, if you want to consider him a potential on the right side, but he kind of enters that fray and looks like a really promising prospect.
Yeah, the age makes you think that he would have, a shorter runway or an inside track for a job quickly.
Yeah.
But the adjustment from the KHL to the NHL can be very complicated. So he could also spend a full year in Laval before he graduates. So
I would imagine he would spend a full year in Laval. I would think so, but
yeah.
it's
so probably that Engstrom and Konyushkov are after the same job.
Perhaps, and there might not even be that job. I mean, I don't know. It's if Mailloux and Reinbacher, it's just a good thing to have. Like it's another right shot option in the organization that they could bring to North America in a year and a half. So, and who's playing a lot of minutes under an NHL style or a coach that understands the NHL game. No, that's just contrast with Demidov. He is in a very good development situation at Torpedo. Yeah. So that's good news.
For sure. And it was it reminds me of what Martin St. Louis said, commenting on the Carrier Barron trade, when he said, we have so many young defensemen. He said, as we move forward, there's more of a chance of this happening.
Yeah.
So basically, it sends a message. Yeah, he's not the last young defenseman that we will trade, because that's just, we have so many. So if they develop properly, and we get into a different phase of our build as a team, there's a chance that there's other youngsters that might be traded. So yeah, when we name Reinbacher, Mailloux, and we add Engstrom and Konyushkov, well, those four, I don't think that we'll ever see the day where those four guys are in the same blue line.
No, you add Struble to that mix. You add there's Hudson's young. I mean, they're not going to trade Hudson. obviously. Oh, I don't think so, at least. But yeah, there's Gooley's young. I mean, Xhekaj's young. Like they do have a lot of young defensemen. That's just a fact. And so
Yeah.
it's yeah, it could. And frankly, Harris was already used, like was already monetized basically to get Line. Kovacevic wasn't a young defenseman. He was on the younger side, but it was an older guy considering his NHL experience. But you look at the Struble situation right now, and might he be the next one? Who knows? I don't know, but we'll see. But anyhow, I think we just wanted to use Future Friday this week to sort of add some context to the Canadians going over to Russia and seeing Ivan Demidov and not having any real ulterior motives behind it.
It's he remains their most
He is the
impressive
jewel. He is the
prospect.
jewel of the empire. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the number of times on this podcast that you said if Kirby Dach doesn't become like a true second line center, they've got a problem. Well, they need to have a centerman for Demidov as soon as next year, because I think that's where he's going to play. So
Yeah.
on that second line, and it got me thinking that if it's not Dach, the Nashville Predators freed up some money by trading Carrier to Montreal. They're trying. They seemingly are shedding players and contracts, and openly, Barry Trotz said that he wanted to probably keep some ammo for next summer,
To get a
whether
center.
through whether
Yeah.
through a free agent acquisition, or maybe even he alluded to possible offer sheets. So if the Kirby Dach experiment doesn't work out this season and the Canadians think that they need to go in a different direction and find a bona fide second line center, it could be that Nashville will be a direct competition for them in that search.
Yeah. Yeah. And with all the draft picks they have, why would they not explore the offer sheet route?
Yeah,
It's it would be a perfectly reasonable thing for them to do. So now they don't have nearly as many picks in 2026 as they do in 25, and that's the 26 picks that you would need to go after to do an offer sheet. But I think they have all the picks necessary to make a significant offer. So let's see if they go that route.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening to our podcast today. We'll be back on Monday after those two games against Detroit. Have a great weekend, Arpin, and we'll talk again on Monday.
Bye, everyone.